The strange thing about a 40-year sentence is how quiet it sounds when you say it out loud, like a number you read off a page, until you realize it is going to be the rest of your life measured in doors that lock behind you. My name is Marcus Hill. I'm 62 years old, and I'm serving 40 years because of one small choice I made like it didn't count, like it was just one night, just this once, just to get through a tight spot. When people hear 40 years, they picture a big moment, a mask, a gun, some movie scene where a man decides to become a criminal. They don't picture a set of keys on a break room table, or a hand reaching out without thinking, or a man who is too proud to admit he is scared about rent. They don't picture a normal Tuesday where the coffee tastes burnt and the air feels heavy, and your mind keeps saying, you deserve a little break. I think about keys more than I think about anything else in here. The keys the officers carry, the keys I do not have, the keys I used to keep on a ring that jingled when I walked. Back then, I liked that sound. It made me feel like I belonged somewhere, like I had a place to return to. In this place, keys mean permission, keys mean time, keys mean somebody else deciding what your next hour looks like. Before all this, I was a regular man with regular problems and a talent for acting like I didn't have any. I grew up with a father who believed you kept your head down and handled your business, and if you couldn't handle it, you didn't complain, you just worked harder. I learned early that pride was not a feeling, it was a rule. You didn't ask for help. You didn't admit you were behind. You didn't tell anybody you were one flat tire away from not making it. In my 20s, I worked maintenance at an apartment complex. Not a fancy one, not a place with fountains, just a tired set of buildings where the hallway lights flickered and the laundry room smelled like old soap. It was honest work. The pay wasn't great, but the manager trusted me. He gave me a master keyring, the kind that opens everything, and he said, "Don't lose these," like he was handing me a piece of his life. That ring of keys changed the way I stood in the world. People nodded at me. Tenants needed me. I could fix a leaky sink and feel like a hero for 10 minutes. I could walk through a locked door and not have to explain why I was there. It gave me a sense of being useful, being needed, and if you've ever been a man who wasn't sure he was needed, you know how intoxicating that can be. I had a girlfriend then, Denise. She was the kind of woman who could make a small kitchen feel warm, even with cheap curtains and a broken drawer that never shut right. She worked days at a daycare. She had a laugh that came from her chest, not her throat, the kind you feel in the room. I loved her. I also loved the idea of being the man who took care of things. I wanted to be steady for her. I wanted to be the kind of guy she could trust without thinking. But there was always this gap between the man I wanted to be and the man my bank account said I was. I was behind on bills more often than I admitted. I would juggle. I'd pay the light bill late and tell myself it was fine because the light stayed on. I'd skip groceries and pretend I wasn't hungry. I'd borrow from tomorrow like tomorrow owed me something. The first domino did not look like a crime. It looked like a decision made with a shrug. There was a tenant in Building C, a guy who always wore clean shoes and smelled like cologne even at 8 in the morning. He wasn't friendly, but he was polite in that careful way, like he didn't want to get too close to anybody. One day he called in a work order and said his lock was sticking. I went up there with my toolbox and my master keys, and he opened the door just enough to let me in. His place looked different from the others. New TV, decent furniture, everything neat. On the kitchen counter there was a key fob and a set of car keys. They were right there, like a little bright thing in a room of grey. I glanced at them, and my mind did what it always did when it saw something I didn't have. It imagined what it would feel like to hold it. I fixed his lock in 5 minutes. As I was packing up, he got a phone call and stepped into the other room. He didn't ask me to wait. He didn't say a word. He just turned his back. You would think the thing that stopped me would be morality or love or fear. The thing that stopped me should have been my own name, the idea of losing it. But what stopped me was smaller and dumber than that. I remember looking at those keys and thinking, I'm not stealing a car, I'm not doing anything big, I'm just going to take them and see what happens. I'm just going to move the car maybe. I'm just going to prove to myself I could. It was the kind of thought that sounds ridiculous in daylight, but when you're full of pride and quiet panic, your brain starts calling foolishness, options. My hand moved before my conscience did. The keys were in my pocket, and it felt like nothing. That's what people don't tell you. The first wrong thing can feel like nothing at all. No lightning, no dramatic music, just a pocket with a little extra weight. I walked out. I went down the stairs. Every step I kept waiting to feel guilt like a punch. Instead I felt alert, alive, like I had finally found a secret door out of my own life. I went to the parking lot and I found the car, a dark sedan that looked like it belonged to someone who had things figured out. I stood there staring at it, and I could have put the keys back right then. I could have walked back up, slipped them on the counter, and nobody would have ever known. But pride is not just about feeling strong. Pride is also about refusing to feel ashamed. And I was ashamed, not of what I was about to do, but of what I was. A man counting dollars in his head. A man pretending he wasn't scared about next month. A man who wanted to look steady while his insides were shaking. So I pressed the button. The lights blinked, the door unlocked. That little click felt like the universe agreeing with me. I drove around the block. That was all. I didn't take it far. I didn't even turn the radio on. I drove with both hands tight on the wheel, heart pounding, telling myself this was just a test, just one loop, just to feel it. When I pulled back into the lot, I sat for a second and looked at my hands, like they belonged to somebody else. Then, instead of getting out and putting the keys back, I started making deals with myself. I thought about the overdue notice on the kitchen table. I thought about Denise's face when she saw it and tried not to look worried. I thought about the way my father would have looked at me if he knew I was behind. I told myself I deserved a little relief. I told myself the tenant wouldn't miss it for a day. I told myself it was temporary. That's the moment people don't understand when they ask how it starts. It starts with language. It starts with you changing the words so you don't have to change yourself. I kept that car overnight. The next morning I parked it 2 blocks away and walked back like nothing happened. I put the keys back on the counter in Building C when the tenant wasn't looking. No one caught me. The tenant never reported it. Maybe he thought he forgot where he parked. Maybe he was too embarrassed to admit it. Maybe he had his own secrets. All I know is the world didn't punish me, and my brain learned the lesson fast. If you do something wrong and nothing happens, your mind starts calling it safe. After that, my attention to keys changed. I noticed who left what where. I noticed which doors clicked shut too slowly. I noticed which people were careless. I became the kind of man who watched, not because I was born bad, but because I was letting a new part of me practice being awake. At first it stayed small. Cash from a wallet left on a dresser when I went in to fix a sink, a watch that looked expensive, a laptop bag sitting by the couch while a tenant ran to the bathroom. I took things that felt like they would not be missed, because that's what I told myself, that I was taking from people who had plenty. I convinced myself I was not hurting anyone. I convinced myself I was balancing something. And the scariest part is how quickly my heart stopped arguing with me. Denise noticed I had more money. She didn't accuse me, but she asked questions the way someone asks when they are trying to love you without letting you lie to them. One night she looked at me across the little kitchen table and said, "Marcus, what are you doing?" That was it. Just that. Not a speech, not a threat. Just a simple question. I smiled like I didn't understand what she meant. I made it into a joke. I said business was better. I told her she worried too much. I remember the way her eyes held on my face for a second longer than usual. like she was trying to memorize the man she knew before he changed. I wish I could tell you I stopped because of that question. I did not. I doubled down. Because pride does not like being seen. Pride hates being questioned. Pride would rather destroy your life than admit you are afraid. The turning point, the clear before and after shift, came when I lost my job, and I told myself I wasn't losing anything worth keeping. A tenant reported missing jewelry. The manager called me into his office. He was a tired man with a soft stomach and a hard voice, the kind of guy who didn't like conflict but didn't like looking weak either. He didn't have proof, not enough, but suspicion is a kind of proof in certain places. He slid my key ring across the desk and said I needed to turn it in. I can still see that ring of keys on his desk, the metal dull in the fluorescent light. In that moment, it felt like he was taking my identity, not my access. I got angry, and I told him off. I told him he was ungrateful. I told him he was accusing the wrong man. I said the kind of things people say when they want to sound innocent without being honest. He listened, and then he said one sentence that still follows me. He said, "You're not as careful as you think." I walked out of that office with my head high and my stomach hollow. Denise tried to talk to me that night, but I was full of heat. I blamed everybody. I blamed the tenants. I blamed the manager. I blamed the economy. I blamed bad luck. Anything but the truth, which was that the small choices had turned me into a man who couldn't stand in his own life without reaching for something that didn't belong to him. When I didn't have keys anymore, I went looking for other doors to open. A friend from my old neighborhood heard I was out of work. He said he knew a way to make quick cash, nothing serious, just a little job. That phrase, nothing serious, is one of the most dangerous phrases in the world. It is a lullaby for your conscience. The job was driving. That was my part. Just drive, he said. You don't even have to go inside. I told myself that meant I wasn't really involved. I told myself I was just behind the wheel. I told myself I was just a ride. But if you are the one who brings people to harm and takes them away afterward, you are not a ride. You are part of it. You are holding the door open. The first time, it was a convenience store late at night. I sat in the car with my hands on the steering wheel so tight my fingers hurt. I watched my friend go in, and I watched him come out with a bag and a rush in his eyes like electricity. When he got in the car, he laughed under his breath and said, "Easy." Easy is how you lose your life, because easy makes you forget cost. We did it again, then again. A liquor store, a gas station, always small, always fast. The money came in dirty little stacks, and I used it to pay bills like I was finally doing what a man was supposed to do. I bought groceries without doing math in my head. I filled the tank without fear. I took Denise out for dinner one time, and I watched her smile at the menu like she was relieved, like she thought the storm had passed. But Denise was not a fool. She knew me. She knew when my confidence didn't match my schedule. One night she sat on the edge of the couch, her hands folded, and she said, "Just come home." That was the line. That's the one that stayed with me. Just come home. I could have heard it as love. I heard it as pressure. I heard it as her trying to control me. I heard it as her, not understanding what it meant to be a man with bills and no job. I told myself she was naive. I told myself she didn't know what it was like to feel cornered. And here is a truth I learned too late. When you are cornered, you start acting like a cornered animal, even if nobody is actually chasing you. The night that earned me 40 years did not start with a plan to ruin lives. It started with my friend calling and saying there was a bigger score, one that would set us up for a while. He said it would be quick. He said the place closed late and the owner kept cash on hand. He said we'd be in and out. He said all the words that make danger sound manageable. I told myself I would drive like always. I told myself I wasn't the one with the gun. I told myself I would not let anything get out of hand. I told myself I could control a situation I had no right to be in. We pulled up behind a small corner store just after closing. The lights were still on inside. I could see the owner through the glass, counting something at the counter. He looked like someone's father. He looked like a man who wanted to go home. My friend handed me a hoodie and said to put it on just in case. That sentence should have stopped me. If you need to hide your face, you are not doing something small. I put it on anyway. I sat in the car, engine running, and I listened to the store's air conditioner hum through the walls, and I felt my heartbeat in my throat. I kept thinking about keys. I kept thinking about how I used to walk into apartments with a ring that meant permission. Now I was sitting outside a place I had no right to enter, waiting for someone else to take something that wasn't his, and my brain still wanted to pretend I was just a driver. Then it happened faster than my mind could narrate it. I heard shouting. I heard a sound that was not shouting, a sharp crack that made my body flinch. The door flew open. My friend ran out, eyes wild, and he was carrying more than money. He was carrying panic. He jumped into the car and yelled at me to go. I hit the gas. I didn't ask questions. That's another small choice, the kind that feels like survival in the moment and looks like complicity later. We didn't get far before the police lights hit the rearview mirror. My friend started screaming, telling me to turn, telling me to floor it, telling me not to stop. I was swelling. My mouth was dry. I could barely see straight, but I kept driving, because pride will make you do awful things just to avoid the shame of stopping. We crashed 2 blocks later. The car hit a curb and spun. The airbag went off, and the world went white for a second. When I opened my eyes, the police were there, guns drawn, voices loud, commands sharp. They pulled me out, hands behind my back, concrete cold on my cheek, my friend yelling somewhere, my chest heaving, my life changing in one long exhale. Later, in the interrogation room, I learned the owner had been shot. He didn't die right away. He died later, after an ambulance, after a hospital, after somebody calling his family. I learned that my friend fired the gun. I learned that my just driving put me at the center of a chain that ended with a man not going home. In court, the prosecutor didn't talk about my feelings. He talked about actions. He talked about choices. He talked about the way a person's decisions stack up until the law decides what you are. My public defender leaned toward me one day and said, "Marcus, you have to tell me the truth." That line did not save me. Nothing could. But it cut through my pride for a second and made me realize I had been lying to everybody, including the man trying to keep me out of a cage. Denise came to one hearing. She sat behind me. I didn't turn around because I couldn't stand to see her face. Afterward, in the hallway, she stood close enough that I could smell her shampoo, and she said softly, "I don't know who you became." I wanted to say I didn't know either. I wanted to say I was sorry. But pride, even then, tried to protect me from feeling small. I said nothing. That silence is one of the heaviest things I carry. They sentenced me. 40 years. The judge's voice was steady, like he was reading the weather. When the gavel came down, it didn't feel like a dramatic end. It felt like a door closing in slow motion. Prison teaches you routines. It teaches you how to live inside time that isn't yours. At first I told myself I would survive by staying hard. I told myself feelings were dangerous. I told myself I would not break. But the years don't care what you tell yourself. The years keep coming. The people you love keep aging. The world keeps changing without you. And there are nights when the noise in the dawn finally settles, and you can hear your own thoughts, and there is nowhere to run from them. I started marking days on paper, just to feel like I could touch time. Then I stopped, because counting days can make you crazy. So I started counting smaller things. I started noticing keys again, the way they hang from an officer's belt, the way they click in a lock, The way they decide when I eat, when I shower, when I sleep. There are moments when you hear keys coming down the hall and your body reacts before your mind does, because keys in here are a kind of weather too. They signal what is coming. Years into my sentence, after my hair went grey and my hands started looking older than I expected, I had my scare moment, and it was small enough to be humiliating. My sister had arranged a visit. She doesn't come often. It's hard on her. She lives a few hours away and she has her own life, her own kids, her own bills. But she called and said she was coming, and for a week I held that thought like a warm stone in my pocket. I told myself I would be ready. I told myself I wouldn't cry. The morning of the visit, I woke up early. I cleaned my area. I shaved carefully. I even tried to press my shirt the best I could with what we have in here. I kept checking the clock. I kept telling myself, don't miss it. Then something happened that scared me more than any fight, more than any lockdown, more than any threat in this place. I forgot. I don't mean I lost track for a minute. I mean the time came and went and my mind didn't catch it. I was sitting at a table in the day room talking to another guy about nothing, and I glanced at the clock and saw I was already late. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like stepping off a curb you didn't see. I stood up so quickly my chair scraped loud across the floor. I started walking fast toward the visiting area, then faster, then almost running, and the whole way I kept saying in my head, "How did you forget? How did you forget?" Like my own brain had betrayed me. When I got there, the officer at the desk looked at me like I was a child and said my sister had already checked in and left because I didn't show. She couldn't wait forever. People on the outside can't pause their lives because you can't keep track of time. I went back to my bunk and sat down, and my hands started shaking. Not from fear of punishment, from fear of myself, from the realization that I had become a man who missed the thing he wanted most because his mind simply didn't hold it. I waited until the next day, and I put in a request to see the prison clinic. When the nurse asked me what was going on, I didn't dress it up. I didn't make a joke. I didn't blame the clock. I said I'd forgotten something that mattered, and it scared me, and I needed to check in. That was it. No drama, just honesty, a small step. But for a man like me, it was a different kind of courage than the kind I pretended to have when I was younger. After that, I started building habits that looked boring from the outside. I asked the unit officer if I could keep a simple schedule posted where I could see it. I started repeating important dates to myself, the way you repeat a phone number you don't want to lose. I started writing letters the day I thought about them, instead of waiting for a better day. I started apologizing in small ways, not because I thought it would undo anything, but because I was tired of being the kind of man who hid behind silence. My sister came back months later. I didn't miss it. When she sat across from me, I told her I was sorry for wasting her trip. I didn't try to sound tough. I didn't try to make it funny. I said it plain. She looked at me for a long moment, and then she reached across the table and touched my hand, just for a second, because in here, even touch has rules. She said, "I'm glad you're still in there." That sentence broke something open in me. Not the kind of break that feels dramatic, but the kind that lets air into a room that has been closed for too long. Because the truth is, for years I thought my biggest problem was what I did. And it was. A man lost his life. A family lost their father. My actions helped create that. I will never get to pretend otherwise. But underneath that, my deepest rot was the way I kept choosing pride over honesty, impulse over pause, relief over responsibility. People talk about bad decisions like they are storms that roll in. For me, it was more like a slow leak, a tiny compromise that didn't seem urgent, a small theft that felt like nothing, a second choice that felt easier, a third that felt normal. By the time the consequences came, I had already trained myself to live without a stop sign. If I could go back to that apartment in Building C, I wouldn't tell my younger self, "Don't steal because you'll get caught." That's not strong enough. He would have thought he was smarter than getting caught. I would tell him something harder. I would tell him that the first wrong thing is not the first wrong thing. It is the first time you decide your pride is more important than your character. It is the first time you tell yourself your fear deserves a reward. It is the first time you let just this once become a door you keep walking through. I used to love the sound of my keys jangling because it made me feel like a man with access, a man with control, a man with somewhere to go. Now, every time I hear keys in a hallway, I think about how control is not something you grab. Control is something you practice quietly in the small moments where nobody is watching. I'm not telling you this because I think my story is special. In here, everybody has a story that starts with something they thought didn't matter. A punch, a phone call, a decision to drive after drinking, a choice to carry something they shouldn't, a moment of pride that turned into a habit. So if you're listening to me out there, with your own keys in your pocket, with your own life still open in front of you, I want you to pay attention to the small compromises you call harmless. Not because I'm trying to scare you, and not because I think you are a bad person, but because I know how easy it is to talk yourself into becoming someone you don't recognize. There is a moment before the moment. There is always a moment where you can pause, breathe, and choose a different door. That moment doesn't feel heroic. It feels inconvenient. It feels like swallowing your pride. It feels like admitting you need help. It feels like walking away while your ego screams that you deserve more. I used to think strength was never bending. Now I think strength is noticing the tiny place where your thinking starts to bend reality to fit what you want, and stopping right there before you make a life out of it. I can't unlock my past. I can't give that man his life back. I can't give Denise the years I stole from what we could have been. I can't give my sister the visits I missed. I can't hand myself the version of me who stayed honest when it would have been easy to slip. But I can tell the truth from this bunk. I can name the first domino. I can tell you that 40 years didn't begin with a monster. It began with an ordinary man holding a set of keys and choosing pride over pause. If you take anything from me, let it be this. The big consequences don't usually announce themselves. They come disguised as a tiny compromise you can explain away, and the explanation is what drags you forward. So when you hear yourself say, "Just this once," I want you to hear it for what it is. Not permission, a warning. Hold your keys tonight and remember what they mean. They mean you can still go home. They mean you can still turn around. They mean you can still choose the door that keeps your life yours.